Welcome back, everybody, to Regular Dude Reviews. Today, we're talking Spider-Man: No Way Home. So, Spider-Man: No Way Home, it's a 2.5 hour movie. If you've seen the trailer, you basically know the premise of the movie. So, without going into any spoilers, we're going to do spoilers a little bit later in the video, but this movie's fantastic. It's a great Spider-Man movie. So, right off the bat, we're just going to knock this out of the way. Should you see it or should you stream it? Do yourself a favor, go see this movie in the theater. This movie has great action, great characters. If you've watched the trailer, you know it's Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, and all his spider villain friends. All the spider villains that you've come to know and love in this film. And basically what ends up happening is Spider-Man has to get them back. He's got to get all the villains that are coming through. He's got to get them back to their world. The action in this movie is fantastic. The fight scenes, the choreography, just the way they interact with each other is really great. This movie pays homage to all the Spider-Man lore before it, and you're going to really enjoy this. It's a good time. I took the kids with me. I took my wife with me. Everybody had a good time. If you're a moviegoer and you want to see more of an artistic film or something like that, this might not be the one for you. There is some issues with the movie that we'll talk about in a little bit. One of them being the plot itself. I think the plot in the movie is kind of weird. I don't think it works very well, but for what it is, it's good enough to get you through the movie. This movie's got a lot of heart. It's got a great message. The comedy in this movie that you know and love from Marvel movies is there, and it plays well into the story. And all of that comes together in just a really fantastic film. And all of that, it seems to kind of raise the stakes from your regular neighborhood Spider-Man movie. I don't know how much more we can get into without going into spoilers. Also, there's a couple motivations from characters that I don't quite understand or that don't really make any sense in the context of the movie, but those are just small nitpicks. Overall, I would say this movie is one of the best, if not the best Spider-Man movie we've ever had, honestly. So do yourself a favor, go out and see this movie. We're going to have a spoiler discussion. Your fair warning in 3, 2, 1, spoilers. Okay, so now that we're into the spoilers, let's talk about the movie itself, and we'll go through the movie, and I'll give you just a couple of things that kind of stood out to me. So in the basic premise of the movie, like I said before, Spider-Man has to get all the villains that come back to where they're from. But the reason that these villains are here in the first place, because Spider-Man and his buddies don't get into college. So Spider-Man decides to ask Doctor Strange if he can make everybody forget that he's Spider-Man, because he thinks that the reason that they don't get into college is because everybody knows he is Spider-Man, and everybody that knows him, all his friends, it's affecting their lives. Like I said before, the plot is a little weird, because instead of just going on and accepting his life, he goes to see Doctor Strange, and Doctor Strange, being not the Sorcerer Supreme, Wong is actually the Sorcerer Supreme, because they stay in the movie because Doctor Strange was blipped. He got snapped away by Thanos, so he was gone for 5 years. So Wong got the Sorcerer Supreme title by default, which I thought was kind of funny. But the whole plot of the movie is very strange, because I don't know why Doctor Strange decides to help Peter Parker. So, I mean, you have to put your disbelief aside that Doctor Strange would do something kind of so stupid and for such a petty reason because they didn't get into college. But if you let it ride, you get into the movie and you'll have a great time. Doctor Strange is doing a spell to help everybody forget Peter Parker's identity as Spider-Man, or vice versa. And Peter Parker he screws up this spell while Doctor Strange is casting it, and it basically creates a rift, like a rift in time, that allows all the villains from the multiverse that have ever fought Spider-Man, they're coming to get Spider-Man. Little do they know that the Spider-Man that they're coming to get is not their Spider-Man. It's Tom Holland's Spider-Man. But it sets up a cool, as weird as it is, as weird as the plot is and how they get into it, once they're into it, it sets up a really cool situation. So, like I said before, spoilers, not only do we get to see villains from other movies that you've seen in the trailer, so Doc Ock's in the movie, Electro's in the movie, Lizard, I forget the lizard guy's name, Lizardman's in the movie, Sandman's in the movie, Green Goblin's in the movie. The only one that's missing really is Vulture, which would be our Sinister Six, but they're all in the film. which is fantastic. And we also get to see Hollywood's worst kept secret, Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire back as Spider-Man, sharing the screen with Tom Holland. Honestly, I didn't know how they were going to do this. I was telling Don't Panic, we were talking about it once, and when they announced that Tobey Maguire was going to be in the movie, we assumed Andrew Garfield was going to be in the movie. And if you think about it, that's 3 Spider-Men, is 2 friends, and 5 villains. That's 10 characters that this movie had to shove in to 2.5 hours and make the story work, make it cohesive, make it make sense. And they did it. The way that they did it was a little bit different, though. So this movie, Spider-Man captures all the villains like that. Like, literally within the first 40 minutes of the movie, they're all in cages. But the thing that makes it cool is that instead of this movie being like a side quest where Spider-Man, it's like literally a side quest where Spider-Man has to collect each villain. Instead of it being that, they actually get all the villains together really quick. And the plot kind of turns where instead of Spider-Man sending them home, which mind you could have ended the movie right there, all he had to do was send them home. He doesn't want to do that because it will kill them. He wants to save them. He thinks they can be saved, you know, in each of their own ways. So he gets in a fight with Doctor Strange. They end up in the mirror dimension, which is really cool. And Peter Parker's genius actually helps him beat Doctor Strange. There's a part in the movie where he sees everything kind of going around in the mirror dimension. And he thinks to himself, hey, this is geometry. I can do this. And he actually uses geometry to beat Doctor Strange. And there's a funny line that he throws out there. He goes, you know what's cooler than magic? And Doctor Strange looks at him and he goes, math. Which I thought was hilarious. So all the bad guys, now the whole movie turns. Instead of him fighting all the villains, he's trying to save them. So now Doctor Strange is stuck in the mirror dimension. And Peter Parker sets off on his mission to save all of the past villains. He takes them all out of the cells, takes them all to Happy's apartment, because Happy has, I want to call it a replicator, I don't remember the name, and then they start coming up with ways to save each one of them. And in that part, they actually end up saving or rehabilitating, or whatever you want to call it, Doc Ock. Because, you know, Doc Ock's got the spinal injury. He's got a chip in the back of his neck, and that chip is messed up from the Raimi movies, which is what makes him evil. He has voices in his head. So our Peter Parker, Tom Holland, he figures out how to make that chip, and they convince Doc Ock to let him put him on because he doesn't want to help them at all. He's still kind of a jerk, but they convince him to let him put it on, and it turns Doc Ock into a good guy. Most of the villains kind of vanish throughout the movie because the movie really takes, it's not so much about the villains, it's more about Spider-Man fixing what he did. So, you know, back to that part, all of the villains except for Electro kind of has this thing, you know, and we get a good story arc for Electro. You know, not all of the villains just want to go with Spider-Man right away. You know, Doc Ock is down with it. Green Goblin, he's like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, so he's down with it at first. He has his moment. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Sandman doesn't really care. So Sandman's like, I just want to get home to my daughter. And so he just kind of goes along with it. But Electro, you know, before Jamie Foxx's Electro, if you saw I want to say it was Spider-Man 2 or Spider-Man 3. I don't remember which one it was. But his it's Amazing Spider-Man 2. I don't remember. But anyway, his Electro, he was kind of the nerdy guy. He had the comb over with the busted teeth. And he was like a janitor. Nobody cared about him. And then when he became Electro, it kind of fixed all of his features. You know, he got the nice teeth. He looks like Jamie Foxx. He's a good looking dude. And he's got the power. And so when they're all kind of agreeing to be fixed and sent back, Electro's like, well, I kind of like the power, you know? And he's sitting there. They make a device that drains his electricity to kind of make him back to normal. During that moment, Green Goblin comes out, screws up the whole situation. And Jamie Foxx decides, you know what? I'm not doing this. And the villains all take off. So they're out there now. So the villains are all out there. Fast forward later to the movie. I mean, basically the reason the other Spider-Men come out is they're in this movie to help Spider-Man. But they did a really good job with these Spider-Men because, like I was saying before, with 10 different characters, I mean, you can mess that up. The flow of the movie could be messed up. Their intentions for being there. I mean, there's a whole slew of ways you can screw up the writing of this. and I really, really appreciate the time that the other Spider-Men got. So they're not just like cameos, you know. The other two Spider-Man are in this movie towards like dead ass center of the movie to help Spider-Man. His Aunt May, he gets in a fight with Green Goblin, and May gets hit with the hoverboard, and Aunt May ends up dying. Upon Aunt May's death, I mean, he's devastated because Aunt May is the only family he has left, and it just tears him apart. Aunt May does deliver the line, though, before she dies: with great power comes great responsibility. So that was pretty cool. Spider-Men are introduced kind of funny. So Ned and MJ are at Ned's grandma's house, and they're waiting for Spider-Man's kind of cue. They're their backup. They're his backup plan. So if he can't get the villains to go back, they have Doctor Strange's spell in like this lockbox with a button on it that'll just detonate the spell, and they'll go back. It turns out that Ned has superpowers, which is cool. He's magical. So they're hanging out, and Ned, he has Doctor Strange's little ring, his 2-finger ring, the magic ring thing that he uses, and he opens a portal, and he's just sitting there, and he's kind of like, I want to see, show me Peter Parker, you know, and he ends up opening a portal. Peter Parker's standing at the end of the portal. Peter Parker looks at you, walks towards the camera. It's Spider-Man, but it's not our Spider-Man that we know in this film. It's Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. He comes through, they have a cool moment. MJ tells him to prove that he's a Spider-Man. He sticks up on the ceiling with his fingertips. And she's like, that's not good enough. Crawl over there. And he's like, hanging there. He's like, what? It's not good enough. And so he crawls over. Ned's grandma asks him to get the cobwebs out of the ceiling. It's just, it's a really fun moment. And you actually see Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker as you saw him in the first movie, you know, and it kind of characterizes him. Ned is like, you know, that's not the right Spider-Man. Let's try this again. And he does it one more time. Let me see Peter Parker. Standing on the other side of the portal is none other than Tobey Maguire. So now we have our 3 Spider-Men. They are brought in by 2 of them by Ned. The other one we already have. The next scene is a fantastic scene. It's just like in Into the Spider-Verse. It's like the heartstrings moment. Not that Aunt May wasn't, but it's the moment where the Spider-Mans all meet each other, but they all explain, like I said, Spider-Verse does this really well too, but every Spider-Man has an Uncle Ben moment. You know, it's kind of the motivation for them to become the best Spider-Man. And Tom Holland's Spider-Man is wrecked. They meet him up on top of the school. He's up by himself. You know, they all see him. He meets the other Spider-Man, and he's just like, you know, don't tell me you know what I'm going through. And they give him kind of the spiel. Uncle Ben's, we both have Uncle Ben's. They said the same thing to us. Great power comes great responsibility. And we know how you're feeling and blah, blah, blah. And you can't let it take the best of you. And it's just a really great scene. It's an emotional scene. Tears everybody's eyes throughout the theater. And it was cool just to see them all together. The 3 of them have great chemistry, by the way. Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire, and Tom Holland. Just seeing them all together, the chemistry was fantastic. And they had going back and forth, quipping with each other. There's a part in the movie where they're talking about Tobey Maguire's spider web and how it's naturally made inside of his body. And there's a scene where one of the other Spider-Man, I think it's Andrew Garfield, he gets shot. Tobey Maguire shoots his web and he misses what he's shooting at, and it hits Andrew Garfield in the face, and he just goes, ew. Which is fantastic. So, yeah, their on-screen presence is fantastic. Towards the end of the movie, they do have to fight some villains. If you watch the trailer, you know the moment. They have this great back and forth. They come up with antidotes on how to heal all the villains, and they basically go 3v3 against Sandman, Lizard, and Electro. Electro's on there. So they get all them healed. They're all just cool now, normal guys. Green Goblin shows up, and they 1v1 him and Tom Holland and Green Goblin 1v1 on what used to be the Statue of Liberty, had a Captain America shield, fell down, and Tom Holland's pissed. He's going after Green Goblin. He punches the ground once, and it leaves like this big imprint in the metal, and he's pissed. He's fighting Green Goblin, beating him. He picks up Green Goblin's glider, and he's gonna kill him. Like, he's pissed. He took his Aunt May from him, and he's done for. He swings it down, and it's stopped by Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. And they have this great moment. because Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man wanted to kill the person that killed Uncle Ben, and he actually does, and he tells him, you know, it's not going to help. And they have this moment where they're just kind of looking at each other, and then boom, out of nowhere, Green Goblin gets up, stabs Tobey Maguire in the back. You should have heard the theater, man. Everybody was like, oh no, we all thought he was going to die. He's safe. It's all good. They save the day. All the monsters go back. But the big payoff at the end of the movie, short of all the cameos and everything. Oh, and I forgot to mention, the beginning of the movie, we have a small cameo. Matt Murdock is in this movie, which really I thought was cool because I had just rewatched Daredevil like the week before I went and saw this. So it kind of hit different, you know. I was just thinking about Daredevil and Punisher and all them, and so Matt Murdock is the same guy from the TV show. He's reprising his role as Daredevil, which we kind of knew in the MCU, but for whatever reason, I didn't put the two and two together. I didn't think he'd be in this movie, and he's representing Peter Parker as his lawyer in the beginning. There's a funny line that he has. Somebody throws a brick through Peter Parker's window, and he goes whoosh, and he like catches it. And Peter Parker looks at him and he goes, how did you do that? Because they don't really know he's Daredevil. And he goes, he goes, how did you do that? And he goes, I'm a lawyer. And he goes, no, how did you catch that? And he goes, I'm a really good lawyer, which I thought was funny. So it was cool seeing Matt Murdock, and it was cool seeing the actor that I wanted to play Matt Murdock in the movie. So that was awesome as well. Back to the climax of the movie. Basically, the payoff is Peter Parker can save everybody if everybody forgets who Peter Parker is. So Doctor Strange, he's up on the Statue of Liberty. He's got like a spell going, and it's kind of holding this rip in the space-time continuum together. It's the rip that all the villains are coming through. And basically they decide that everybody's going to forget who Peter Parker is. So he goes and says bye to MJ, says bye to all his friends, says bye to the Spider-Man, and that's pretty much it. The end of the movie, everybody forgets who Peter Parker is, and he kind of starts over. Is I think a good ending to the movie. The ending kind of ends on a sad note, really, because they don't get, like, you know, they all don't go to college together. It shows that Ned and MJ get into MIT, they get into college together, but they don't know who Peter Parker is. So he kind of has a little bit of a sad ending, honestly, but it was a good film all the way around. Full of fan service, full of great moments, amazing characters. I'm glad they kept the casting for all the original villains. They brought all the actors back. It's just an overall great film. I don't know what else to say other than that. Go out to the theater, see this movie, and until next time, catch you on the next one. Peace.